and welcome to the Courtney Turner podcast. My guest today is Van Harvey. You may have, if you've been following our core theory, you'll know that he's a member of that. And he is a blogger. He is known as a blogodidact for, blogger and autodidact. And we are going to talk about exiting the wizard circle. So this is definitely a concept that is not going to be foreign to most of you, I am sure. As if you're familiar with the Cognitive Liberty Conference we did, we spent, quite a bit of time talking about exiting the wizard circle. I think that was a term that was also repeated quite a bit when I did the podcast with Jay Dyer, James Lindsay, and Steve Coughlin. And of course, I talk about this in a lot of my work, my book on Hegel's dialectic as a Gnostic Jacob Platter and a machinery of control. Of course, the whole purpose of this is to help you exit the wizard circle. And so that is what we're going to talk about today from many different angles. And Van has done some tremendous work on, I was just telling him that he's written so much, I have not been able to catch up on all of it, but he does a really great job of breaking down concepts that are so incredibly important in our current epistemological warfare scenario that we are all living through. But he does it in a way that he breaks down these concepts that can be kind of philosophical and difficult in some senses, and he breaks it down in a way that is really digestible and so incredibly important. So I am looking forward to this. Van, how are you doing today?
Doing well. How are you?
Well, thank you for being here. Maybe you can give the audience a little bit of your background and how you got into this, this sphere of writing, because you have an eclectic background that has nothing to do with any of this. So, yeah.
Yeah. I pretty much spent the 80s playing in a band on the West Coast, just traveling around. Probably one of the last people that didn't know about Big Brother yet, and decided to finally get a life, get married, and my wife worked with TWA, and our choices were Los Angeles, New York, or St. Louis. Mm-hmm. And we knew we wanted kids, so here we are. So we moved out here late, almost 88, I think. Mm-hmm. And I had always kind of been interested in history, literature, philosophy, and stuff, but not really deep into it until our first kid came along, and it was like, oh yeah, this is kind of important to know some of this,
right?
And kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah. So, what was the first kind of moment? Like, I need to take a look at all of this.
The first moment where I finally realized that I should really be questioning what I thought was right was a friend asked me, I had been spouting off about, this person said that, and that's the way it is, and obviously you're foolish for not believing me. And he was smart enough not to argue with me, but he asked me a couple questions. I was like, oh, yeah, I'll write that out for you and we can discuss it. And as I'm going through it, I'm finding out that's not really quite right. And I went back further in the history and the documents, like, there's no basis for saying that. What the? And there's from that over and over again, it's like, okay, I'm done. And I just put all the reported sources that everyone usually references, kind of cast them aside, and went back to Homer and just started reading my way forward. Mm-hmm. This was right about 89, and I just that was it. I had to figure out what the heck was going on here, and realized that a lot of things that I thought were obviously true weren't.
Right. So much of what you knew just wasn't so. What kind of paradigm shifts did you experience early on? Like, what were some of the things that you thought were obviously true that were not?
Well, the easy tagline one was the objectivist, Aristotle's law of identity, A is A, and all that. Aristotle never said that. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have a law of identity. Mm-hmm. And it was like, oh, that's like central to everything they're telling me, and it's not so. It's not wildly out of sync. I mean, the law of non-contradiction,
Right.
you can easily pull that out of it. But when you're saying it's called this law, and he summed it up this way, and he never called it that, and he never summed it up that way, that's an issue.
Yeah.
And then I was going back through as verifying this and that. The founders were all deists or atheists, and I started reading, their letters, and it's like, yeah, that doesn't really track. Other than a couple
of them were.
that were hardcore that way, but they didn't have to be full blown, into this or that religion, but they were very familiar with and somewhat participating in, at least all the way across the board for the most part, even at least politely going along with. There wasn't the objective was, they're all deists and atheists, and this is all just goofy stuff.
Right.
So yeah, no, that's not quite right.
No.
And yeah, so I had to rethink a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, with the founders, most of them had no formal education, but they read the Bible.
Right.
That was their education. So it was also their foundation, their framework. That's from which the lens from which they were seeing the world. Whether they agreed with it 100% or not varied, but but that was
their commentary between each other would heavy doses of Plutarch and Cicero and Aristotle, Plato, and it was very much, there was a broad, they didn't just come up with this idea that, hey, you know what, we should be free. It's like, no, they didn't start with liberty. Liberty was a result, was what resulted of following through on the ideas that they understood and wanted to apply. And that's a very different take from when we come at it from the economic angles, economic liberties and my economic rights. And it's like, yeah, you left the track. You're no longer, you stepped into the wizard circle and bye-bye. You're no longer in the same reality.
Yeah, for sure. I think that was your latest piece where you're talking about from, what are you and what does liberty mean to you? What does it mean to be an American? And being able to define all of these terms beforehand, and that it is a result, it's a byproduct. It's not the stepping stone. It's not the vehicle. Yeah. So maybe let's start with the economic principles, because I think that that's where you've also done a really great piece on the various labels, which I often refer to these political or ideological labels as really just tactics for marketing, targeting audiences. Not that they didn't have ideological or philosophical roots. And I think a lot of people don't know those roots, which is why the marketing has become so effective, because now it just becomes identity politics, literally. I don't mean that pejoratively. I mean it as a descriptive, way of assessing it. So I think that's very accurate, and it's very problematic because a lot of people don't have the understanding of the philosophical roots from which they were derived, and so they're just trying to find their group, their tribe, and then they put whatever banner on. This is the label, and so now this is the group that I'm a part of. But with that being said, I think a lot of people attach that to economics. They think that that's kind of the cornerstone, when really economic theory and principles are just they're an extrapolation of human behavior, right? That's essentially why people, it's tied to supply and demand. There's resources and how those get allocated, but then it's also marketing, right? Why do people buy what they buy? So I think that people often don't think about it that way. They think about it as like a Marxism versus capitalism, right? It's, not that I would argue Marxism is really an economic theory. It was, it was labeled that way, but definitely wasn't, in my opinion. So, but you had said, like, that you feel the West has been undermined by political economic and philosophical theories. So let's start with economics, and how do you see that to be true?
Well, when we're coming at economics as to pick the time frame with the founders, they were looking at it um, as what resulted from upholding individual liberty under a comprehensive rule of law, something that respected your rights, enforced responses to when someone is violating them.
Mm-hmm.
And other than that, you did what you did. And it was very interesting for them, the political economists at the time, Adam Smith, or a little bit later, Frederick Bastiat. It was looking at how do you get government out of the way so you can get the wealth of nations, the benefits of liberty.
Yeah.
And that is a very different perspective from what began to develop, especially with like J.S. Mill, Mr. Liberty, that no, we need government to tweak people's behavior this way and that to get them to buy these things or behave that way. And it's essentially the elimination of liberty and of economics. Economics is either kind of a report of how things are, or it's a way of driving people's behavior. In the founders era, it was a report on how people behave and whether government is doing too much or too little, or do we need to back off a little bit on this and that. But as it developed, it became a utilitarian way of altering people's behavior and controlling them. That's a very different thing.
It becomes a difference between for the greater good or for the benefit of the individual, right? And
it's that little two-step where it starts saying, well, we got to do this for the greater good, and that'll improve economic liberty and this and that. And what they've actually done is eliminated the cause of what is a greater good, which is the ability to live your life as you see fit, as long as you're being respectful of other people.
Right.
And when you say for the common good, we're going to impose this on that. Number one, you're targeting at least one group or class of people for the benefit of everybody else. So it's no longer a common good,
right?
Which means you're doing the ends justify the means. You're imposing an evil into society, and it's going to spread to everybody. So it's neither common nor good. But that's the tagline. That's the marketing,
right,
for selling it.
Right, and
it does not work out well, as we're discovering.
Right, and even before you get to the common good, who's determining what is good? Who's defined good? Right, I often
it's always those who are the best.
Right, who often don't seem to have the same vision of what is good as I do. So, yeah, that gets to be concerning. So I know, so going back to the labels, I think when we look at this, I think maybe we can unpack this for people, because I know, especially the libertarian card gets very confusing for a lot of people, especially when it comes to economics. And I have a lot of thoughts in this area. Because people kind of use it as the it's the beacon, right? The Austrian School of Economics. Yeah. So, but we can unpack all of it, or whatever part you want to. Yeah. What are your
where to jump at that with for instance, was it Henry Hazlitt? He has it's his book, Economics in One Lesson, that he basically kind of expanded on one of Frederick Bastiat's what is seen and what's not seen. And his point was that modern economic theory, especially as quote unquote starts with Keynes, was looking only at immediate effects in immediate areas instead of looking at the entire picture. How is it going to affect not just this group, but the entire society?
Right.
And what he was saying is, you got to start with that. And if it falls into that, then okay, go ahead. Which is fine at that economic level. But unfortunately, what it presumes is that you can start at that level. What actually is true, what is right, what is wrong, plays second fiddle, if at all, to what is going to be useful for the common good. And you're right back into the spin of dealing with economics suddenly is controlling your life instead of giving you a report on how things are functioning. It's driving the car.
Right.
And things don't go well. Every action, and well, Hayek is a good example. He's often the guy, whether von Mises or Hayek, is like, oh, economic liberty all the way. If you keep reading Hayek, he was very much for the United Nations and we have to have a controlling authority to control everything. It's like, but I thought you said, well, yeah, but we got to help the greater good, and the greater good is bigger economy, and bigger economy means you need to do that. You can't do that, and everyone else should be doing these things. It's like, you've still got the same people directing everybody else for what they've decided is good for you. They want to live your life for you.
Right.
Some of them like to be a little bit more seemingly hands-off than others, but they all want to rule you.
Yes. Hayek is a great example. The Road to Serfdom. It sounds like the title was a little bit more of a blueprint than it was a resistance. But yeah, it is a little bit deceptive because I often ask people who are, freedom-minded libertarians who think that Austrian School of Economics is a bulwark against tyranny, and they usually champion the Road to Serfdom or Hayek, in general. And I often ask them, they've read the end where he does literally say that the solution to a lot of these problems would be to create an economic socialist world order. I think he called it an international economic world order is what he calls it. But, something to that effect, which basically the same thing. He was the Austrian School of Economics was a offshoot of the London School of Economics, right, which is the Fabian Society. And the Fabians, right, Beatrice and Sydney Webb, Beatrice and Sydney Webb were, founders of the Fabian Society, and they were very instrumental in using the Soviet Union actually for a, beta testing playground for economic planning, right? That they wanted to bring to the United States, which is essentially socialist economics. So, yeah. So then,
as John Dewey did also as John Dewey also did with education.
Yes.
He used Soviet Union and China as test cases for how we could do this and do that and control everything. And the economics and the education are two different wings of the same bird.
Yes.
Of the positivist, utilitarian, how it plays out in whether productive action or productive thought. They want to control you and make sure your thoughts don't go in the wrong way as far as they're concerned.
Yeah, it's really interesting when I talk to people, who have gone down the trail through education, because that touches on everything. It's like they somehow have they've come to all the same places that I have, but their starting point was very different. But it's because you're right; they have really used education and a lot of it was done with the Soviet Union, as a testing ground, with the intention of bringing the same plans here. So, yeah. Very. Yeah, very much so. So, what do you think is the biggest deception for people? Because I think a lot of people are very much still kind of caught in this nominalistic, constructivist game, and they don't think they are. They think they're the voices championing liberty and individuality. And I loved your recent piece on America because it was like, well, what does that mean to you? And you ask the people who are rallying in for protests and whatnot in every cause that is very antithetical to our Constitution, and they will tell you they're doing it because they're trying to preserve America. And then you have people on the opposite end of that pole who will tell you that's antithetical to everything that America stands for. And so how is that America? But they both genuinely believe it because, and I think a lot of that is because of our education system, because of the indoctrination and omission of real history. So
The education comes in handy there because it's taught us instead to read, be familiar with, consider, think about, and switched instead to finding the answers that the experts say are the answers.
Right.
And so we got students that aren't reading the material and thinking about it and understanding and discussing and arguing. They're reading through the textbooks, trying to find the answer that they know will fill in that blank or that will check off A, B, and C on the tests.
Yeah.
And they come out with all kinds of answers that they can give and no understanding or justification for them that goes anywhere below the very thin surface level. And they think they're being objective and knowledgeable about it.
Right.
And it gets they are what I was calling in one kind of the label people, in that they get very prickly when you ask them, well, what do you mean by that? In the case that, well, I'm an American. Okay, well, you mean an American as in no administrative state, or an American as in individual rights are and private property are important? Oh, well, that's just old stuff. This is the way it is, and this is the way it's supposed to be. It's like, can you tell me how that changed, or do you not recognize that this all started essentially 1900 forward? No. Before that, there were all slavery and bad people, and okay, it can get to very frustrating discussions.
Yeah, for sure. I would say definitely 1913 was a huge turning point. I think 1861 was a big turning point as well, though. Yeah.
1863 is which will be is a stunner for most people, is when we got the first Department of Education.
Yeah.
With the what's his name? Morrill Land Grant College Acts that set up, first involved the federal government in education in the state. The first, as far as I can find, also of the federal government actually
right?
using.
Oh, sorry.
Huh?
I was just going to say, I think
the federal government,
Gilman, who was given
using the carrot and the stick to the states. Hey, we want you to do these things, and we'll send you this money if you do that.
Yep.
And that's got the whole thing rolling. Yeah, the first secretary of the Department of Education, I forget how they phrased it then, kind of scared the hell out of everybody, and they kicked it back down out of the cabinet level. But it's been there ever since. And all Carter did with that little bit of legislation was boost it back up to cabinet level and give it some more authority in this and that. But it's been we've been on a bad road for a long while. And I think the most frustrating thing sometimes is when people think, oh, we just need to go back to what was being taught in the 80s or the 60s is when it went bad. It's like, no, no. You need to go back to about 1830 if you really want to try to nip it in the bud. But it was spreading even before that. So it's
oh, for sure.
It's deep seated. If if we're starting from the level of whether it's economic reforms or education reforms, that you want to reform this because of this bad thing you see, you're completely missing what's really going on and you're just perpetuating it, which is exactly what every reform has done, whether economic or education, has always intensified the problem and spread it because
Yeah.
they're not going back to where you should be starting from.
Yeah, for sure. I think, yeah, I would definitely agree. It goes back way further. The poison. You've read The Poison Loving Cup? Have you read that?
No, I haven't.
Oh, that's a great book. Yeah, it's a so it's really about like the like pro Anglo perspective of education and
Mhm.
how the omission of accurate history, in American education for the intentions of pro Anglicanizing education, and it's a fascinating read. It's a very I don't know. It's sad to read through it because the history that I know it does really track, with most of my research. So, but yeah, I recommend that. That's also, and this is, going back to basically.
I've I've yeah, I've heard of that a
Mm,
few times, and I've seen a few clips out of it. It looks really intriguing to say the least, but I haven't gotten hold of it yet.
yeah. Well, it makes sense if you follow the theory kind of the like great rapprochement theory. This was, the idea that there was going to be an Anglo-American establishment. So, and then there's not really a separation. It's more of an illusion. And I think there's a
Yeah,
lot of evidence to indicate that, that from the world we're living in. So,
yeah. I think the when you have a philosophy that's counter to what Flint came up with, the classical American liberal,
hmm
that's counter to that, it's going to um, take root in a number of different areas,
hmm
and they don't even need to be coordinated. It's just going to happen. That philosophy makes unwitting conspirators of everybody who buys into the ideas.
hmm
And as you get people who are in positions of power and they buy into that kind of idea of we need to control, and whether it's Britain or America, we need to turn this beast in our direction.
Yes.
They don't even need to be cooperating
No.
consciously.
Right.
It will take effect,
Yeah.
and you'll see it in the Fabians, you'll see it in J.S. Mill before them,
Yeah.
or whoever it pops up with the Horace Mann.
Oh,
For
yeah.
God's sake, with the figure, he went over to. That was a big thing in the early 1800s, late 1700s, was to take the European tour and go to Germany
hmm
and get the newest in what was coming out of there.
Right.
And Horace Mann drank the whole thing down and brought it back to us with
Yep.
a Prussian theory of education, and he did the first bits of data collection. He brought in Fichte's idea of written tests. Said, "Oh, we don't need kids actually thinking and talking and with their teacher and explaining what they understand. No, we'll just have them fill in the blank answers,
Yep.
and then we can grade those, not just to see from his point of view, Horace Mann's point of view. It wasn't just to see if kids got the new things of A's, B's, and C's grading, which didn't exist before,
Uh-huh.
but that it also told him what teachers were towing the line that he gave. And the ones who didn't, he got fired. The parents who objected, he got he used the data collection for social control.
Yep.
And it was it's a piece. Once you bite into that, the philosophy behind it all, you're going to be expressing it, whether it's in education or economics or politics, law. It's going to come out Once you've left a real concern for what is real and true,
Right.
and good or bad or evil,
Right.
you're in the loop. You're stepped into the machine, and you're going to pedal it right along.
Yes. And yeah, Hearthman was influenced by Fichte, and Fichte was drawing from Pestalozzi. And Pestalozzi, was a direct, member of the Illuminati, espousing their views, and brought Fichte into that circle. But what was really just kind of astounding about Fichte is that he popularized Pestalozzi's ideas of education, but he took it a step further and decided, that the state should be much more involved than the family. And that he was really instrumental in the destruction of the family, I would argue, and the education
His letters
role in doing.
letters to the German people. That's just, it's an astounding declaration of the need for totalitarian state, total control. And his idea was that, well, because Napoleon beat the Germans,
Yep.
obviously the problem was
The Battle of Jena.
People think
1807, Battle of
too
Jena.
much. We got to stop them. Yeah. We got to stop people from thinking. We just give them all the right answers, and then they'll all do what is best for the state and the people and the whole bit.
Yeah.
Fichte, he took Kant's stuff too, and I think Kant was really annoyed and ticked off at Fichte because he made very clear all the things that Kant tried to kind of give a reasonable sounding gloss to. And Fichte's like, oh, the boom. And there's no this and there's all that. There's no reality and it's all that. And he's someone asked Kant, isn't this guy Fichte, isn't he doing wonderful things with his stuff? And Kant was like, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, and Kant was problematic in his own right, but Fichte definitely took things outside of the framework of reality. He really brought everything into the mystical. Fichte was in the one who codified the thesis, antithesis, synthesis triad. That was an interpretation of Kant, which wasn't actually Kant's either, but he interpreted Kant. It was I can't pronounce his name, but it's Schallibaus who popularized that because he was inspired by Fichte. So he had read a lot of Fichte and he fancied himself a Hegel scholar, but it was really reading this this codification of this trialectic thesis, antithesis, synthesis, and which was not Hegel's at all, but that's what became attributed to Hegel as the Hegelian dialectic, which he actually rejected Kant's notion of dialectic altogether. Both Kant and Plato, he said that it was too abstract. Obviously he wrote in German, so he wasn't using this terminology, but essentially he was saying that it wasn't an instrument. He wanted an operating system, a methodology that could be utilized for advancing the historicity of man towards the Geist, towards the absolute, the rational absolute. Yeah. So... which again brings it back to the collective versus the individual, which seems to be the ongoing theme, I feel like. So,
yeah. What I will trace it back to, not necessarily as the starting point. I mean, you can find nominalists before him and Machiavelli and so forth, but Descartes, when he came out with his method of doubt, think therefore I am stuff.
Cogito ergo sum.
It sounds so. Oh yeah, that's great. I'll just doubt everything and question this and that. And it's like, when you start doing that, you leave a reference point with reality because you're presuming, oh, I doubt that's true. Based on what? Well, I feel it. I feel I can doubt that.
Yeah.
Okay. Based on what is real and true that gives you rise to see that something doesn't fit.
Right.
Oh no, I just doubt it. okay. And you apply that to everything, and it just snowballs. And it very much did so from
Yeah.
that point on.
It's
It became, especially with the science helped. I mean, it up to a point
yeah.
that makes it kind of makes sense, but it feeds into everything else and corrodes. As Hume brought forth, skepticism. Just you can't believe anything is true. You have no clue. Sun may not rise tomorrow.
Right. It's the
Even
it's the groundwork for critical theory, right? It's that the foundation for critical theory. It's the first principle of Hermeticism, right? Mentalism, where all is the mind. So there is no reality, there is no physical domain, there's no empiricism because all is the mind. It's also the groundwork for Gnostic meditation, right? Because you've now created essentially a tabula rasa where it's whatever you create. And it is very much, I think, inspired by a Platonic realm of, the allegory of the cave, the forms and the shadows and the intelligible realm. But I think it's a much more, I mean, because Plato at least still subscribed to that there was some sort of a truth, there was some sort of an
right,
objective reality that we might not know, but that there is some sort of truth, and that aspirational is the good, the true, the beautiful, right? That was so. I think Descartes took it in a much
yeah,
more hermetic.
inspired by in the same way that um, a murderer is trying to help you out of your pain. It's like it just turns it
Yeah.
completely inside out and opposite. And it's like with the tabula rasa, and
Hmm.
Aristotle came up with the idea. Well, all knowledge comes through the senses,
Hmm.
but he very clearly understood, the three acts of the mind and so forth. That's there. We
Hmm.
have a human nature. Our mind works in a particular way,
Hmm.
and we gather information through the senses, and we develop our knowledge and so
We
forth.
talked about abstraction, right? We're able to use
Yeah,
reason to abstract, even if we don't have all the information. So, yeah.
right. So that part is in us. It's
Hmm.
human nature, and what you learn isn't going to wipe that out. But the Gnostics, oh no, real tabula rasa. We don't even need the tabula, just rasa,
Just Rasa.
blank. We'll build it all out of our doubts and wishes and hopes and dreams, and yeah,
And eradicate reality, any semblance of reality, which does, yeah, that also seems to be a real cornerstone of the crux of the debate. To this day, I think it's very much the realist versus the, and a lot of them are not necessarily intentionally trying to obfuscate or manipulate. I think that there are a lot of dreamers and idealists, and they're more susceptible to this type of um, mystical aspiration. But
and
unfortunately, that yeah,
yeah, and a lot of sorry,
yeah,
and a lot of people that like me thought that what they had been told, well, it must be true. Why would it be in all these textbooks and everywhere if it wasn't true?
right,
What is it? Well, it's got to be based on what's real and true. So it must be, and so therefore we'll keep building on it. And they don't go and look themselves. They didn't start. They never learned from school on up to start with what is real and true, and that is there is something that's good, and what is good is real and true, and what is bad is what conflicts with that.
right.
That doesn't really come into play anymore.
How would you advise people? Because I think people do want to know. I think people know they're being lied to. I think people
Mm.
know they're being manipulated, and this is part of why the what I believe is the Gnostic lie is so appealing. Right, because they think they're getting the gnosis, and so they're being initiated into the real truth is what they believe, and I think that is very appealing, especially at a time like this when so many truths are being revealed and lies are being exposed. So, but I think that it's deceptive, and it's also in some ways, and I don't say this to be derogatory. It's but in some ways it's lazy, right? Because they're thinking they're being handed that secret knowledge, but they're not really doing the real work of trying to ascertain truth, which requires like deliberate investigation. It requires, arguably a scientific method. It requires a true examination, and also requires some discernment, which is something that needs to be developed. I mean, I think people innately haven't, some element of discernment, but it is something that gets developed through effort and through practice and work and willingness, right? The willingness to be wrong and to make mistakes and to do intellectually rigorous tasks, which a lot of people don't
Yeah.
want to do.
And I think every step of the way from different angles, as someone asks, well, is that true? And on one end, they'll get the answer of, well, true for who? It's true for me. It cannot be true for you. Oh, okay. So I got to be. Oh, okay. And then you get the other
reality.
with reality. Well, is that an apple or is that a green ball? How do you know? You can be fooled, can't you? So you can't really know what is reality. And there's so many easy, well-planned, frankly, deceptions that are out there to keep people from actually thinking about what is real and true and how do I know it. They don't, of course, say that, well, how do you, I can say that this might have been an apple or it might have been a green ball, which means that it is one or the other, and I have a way of understanding that. That gets brushed by. Say, is it true for me or true for you? What is it that you're talking about? And if you're saying that it's not true for me, what is it? How can it possibly be true for you? What do you mean by true? No, the questions don't get asked of what is reality, what is real, how do you know it, what follows from that, and what should you do about it. That is completely out of our educational system. It's, what are the answers? Will it be useful? Does it promote the greater good? Are people happy and smiling? And
well-being.
Well-being. Oh man, there's another that we just we're led around. It's not that difficult to find out yourself that it's not true and to go look at it. If I can do it, there's a kid playing in a band for 10 years, suddenly found himself with kids. Well, it's doable.
Yeah.
And, even when you have zero time, you can do it. You do have to go look. You have to think about it. You have to be willing to give it honest consideration and realize that you're wrong. That is, I think, that you can be wrong. It is the most important thing to realize, and that not that just you can be wrong, but that is a way of finding out when you are right. If you realize you're wrong, it's because you found out something is true and something isn't.
Right.
Keep going.
Right.
Press on.
Yeah.
And we're kind of taught that you should be depressed about being wrong on something, or didn't get good grades or whatever. You found something out. Obviously, you now know that wasn't the way it is. So look a little deeper. Keep going. It's worth it. The life you live, your own mental state of being, is a very different thing when you're basing it on what you understand is real and true, and the type of outlook that doubts everything that's out there. Woody Allen or John Wayne, take your pick. I'm staying away from Woody.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Not necessarily. I probably could have picked
He
a
was
better one.
funny. He was definitely funny. But yeah. uh, so you have children. You said that was like a real turning point in recognizing how distorted our education system is. And what were you going to say? Sorry. Oh,
It
yeah.
wasn't.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So what did you see that they were being taught, and what about that was disturbing?
Math was the first one that really started coming through. The changing of all the terms. It was no longer equations. It was now math sentences and this and that and
What?
different ways of, yeah. This was in the mid 90s, early to mid 90s is when that started coming up. And I was like, what are you talking about? And trying to help our oldest with his math and said, no, my teacher doesn't want me to write it that way. Like, what? And I started looking through the books. It's like, what is this? And I went in and talked with the teacher, and the teacher was not pleased that I was questioning her pedagogy and the materials. I was like, what the heck? And that was what's the name of that math? Oh, something like CMP. Or, it was being promoted as the latest new math kind of thing. I
Common.
got a dose of that,
It's common.
and yeah, it was before Common Core, but it was leading into it,
Right. Right.
and so that was the first kind of wake up, and then
Mhm.
um, social studies, which I've always, yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Is there a bit? How do you pronounce her name?
Charlotte
Charlotte
Beat.
is a beat.
Yeah.
I think I've pronounced it 5 or 6 different ways, but
She
she
was.
was the first one I think who really down to the core realized what was going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And she helped Anthony Sutton. He has a
mm,
whole chapter in his book on the Order of Skull and Bones and how the order controls education.
yeah.
Yeah, he
Um,
gave him a lot of the notes for that. Yeah.
Someone else who really put it very clearly what was going on with how education had been hijacked and was no longer what it had been, and was
Jonathan
no longer even
Gatto.
towards the same purposes. Huh?
Jonathan Taylor Gatto.
No,
Oh,
before Gatto, guy that was early on at showing that the education had been hijacked. But he uh, tells it that he was talking with an old aristocrat, Italian aristocrat guy, and he was saying that how he never meets educated Americans anymore, and he couldn't figure out why that was. And gosh, I can't think of his name either, but he pinned it down to, I haven't met an educated American in about 30 years. And you trace it back, and it's about 1890
wow.
when that would have been divided from. And that was really when Dewey's progressive education was really hitting all the colleges
Yep.
and intelligentsia, and
Mm,
everyone was buying into it.
yep.
And from that point on, this guy was saying, I don't meet any young, educated Americans. I don't understand why that is. Like, oh, well, we gave that up.
It was by design. That's why Charlotte called it the deliberate dumbing down of America.
Yep.
Yeah. So you were saying so
That's
that. Yeah, no, definitely. So you were saying that it was the Common Core, well, prior to the predecessor to Common Core math,
one.
and then in social studies, what were you seeing?
Social studies had a lot of, well, we're starting to get the framing of, bad white people,
Mm,
old dead white guys, and all this and that. and wonderful, indigenous people, and it was, you're starting to see the identity. Not that these people did reprehensible things,
Right.
and this is why those things are reprehensible and why those things should not be done anymore. That wasn't it. It was trying to attach it to an identity, a group, a class of this and that, without really getting into any discussion of why something is good and why something is wrong. It was just this group versus that group, and
Right.
that was starting to pop up late '90s,
Yeah. I
2000s. That's when we were trying to remedy the day's schooling at home at the kitchen table
yeah.
to as best as we could, trying to undo it.
And how?
And then when Common Core, when Race to the Top came out, that's when I really got involved, just stepping out and raising Cain.
Right.
And that's right about when the Tea Party started up also.
Right. So that Tea Party was when, 2009 or 2008?
Yeah, 2000, late 2008, 9, right in there.
Go Obama. I think, yeah.
Yeah, actually, we started getting going before Obama, but that was when it really
Took
lit
off.
fire. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when Bush decided to, well, what was his phrase? I gotta destroy the free market to save the free market. It's like, yeah, we're not
Phoenix
talking about the
did.
same thing.
Burn it down to build back better.
Yeah.
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 Yes, the Phoenix it. I actually just got a book on the centenary of Tavistock. Apparently, 2020 was the centenary of Tavistock, and so there's a Margot Waldo was one of the editors of this book, and it was by Phoenix Publishing. I'm like, of course it was. Of course it was. Yeah, Phoenix Publishing. It's yeah. So they had their Operation Phoenix before the CIA did. Yeah. But
And again, you get that same idea, the philosophy expressing itself. Dewey, in, was it 1890? He was laying out the framework for having healthcare happening in the schools,
yep.
and that the schools should be the center of government.
Yep.
The classroom should be the lowest level of how government is expressed and managed and controlled. Everything through the schools, and controlling behavior.
Yes.
And that was when
That does it.
his name, Cubberley, Elwood P. Cubberley,
Mm-hmm.
who basically, following or along with Dewey, kind of restructured the schools into the superintendent systems.
Mm-hmm.
He was gloating in one of his books published. Every year, the child is becoming more to belong more and more to the state and less to the parent. And he was gloating about that as a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Published in his book that all the teachers, colleges, and people involved in superintendents and so forth were implementing.
Yeah.
And the rest of us were assuming that the kids are getting taught A's and B's. And this is 1909, 1919.
Yeah.
This stuff was already deeply in place for how to control and manipulate people. The entire people was what they were going for. And whether it was
they were
through the school systems or through
disciples through
Tavistock
the Leipzig
Connection.
connection. They were, and Wilhelm Wundt, who brought the Prussian model over through the Leipzig connection, and he was a Hegelian, so that was.